My name is David, and I thought I had it all. A successful career, a loving wife, and a beautiful home. Our story begins in a picturesque suburban neighborhood, the kind you see in movies where every lawn is perfectly manicured and every house looks almost identical. My wife Emily and I had been married for over a decade. Together we had built a life filled with fond memories, laughter, and most importantly, trust. Or so I believed. Emily was the light of my life, a woman with a heart of gold and a smile that could brighten even the darkest days. We met in college and fell in love quickly, our bond deepening with each passing year. After graduation, I landed a job in finance, and Emily pursued her passion for teaching. We eventually settled down in a charming, close-knit community where everyone knew everyone else's business. Our home was our sanctuary, a place where we could escape the chaos of the outside world. It was a cozy two-story house with a white picket fence and a garden that Emily tended to with great care. We spent countless weekends hosting barbecues for our friends and neighbors, enjoying the simple pleasures of life. Our social circle was tight-knit, and among our closest friends was Mark, my best friend since high school. Mark was like a brother to me. We had been through thick and thin together, from teenage misadventures to adult responsibilities. He was always there when I needed him, and I trusted him implicitly. He and Emily got along well, which made our gatherings even more enjoyable. Little did I know that this trust would soon be shattered in the most devastating way possible. Our idyllic life seemed perfect from the outside. We had our share of ups and downs, but we always managed to pull through, supporting each other through thick and thin. At least that was what I thought until a few months ago when I began to notice subtle changes in Emily's behavior. Changes that would ultimately lead to the unraveling of our seemingly perfect life. It all started with small, almost imperceptible changes in Emily's behavior. At first, I chalked it up to the usual stress and fatigue that comes with managing a busy household and a demanding job. But as the weeks went by, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Emily had always been a creature of habit. She had her routines, her favorite shows, and her weekend rituals. Lately, though, she seemed distracted, her mind elsewhere even when we were together. She started coming home later than usual, claiming she had to stay late to finish grading papers or attend impromptu staff meetings. While this wasn't entirely out of the ordinary, the frequency and duration of these late nights raised a red flag. Then there were the phone calls. Emily had never been one to guard her phone zealously, but suddenly, she became very protective of it. She would take it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom, and she always kept it on silent mode. When I casually asked her about it, she brushed it off, saying it was because her students' parents were calling her at all hours with questions. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, I noticed she was unusually quiet, barely touching her food. Her eyes seemed distant, lost in thoughts she wasn't willing to share. I asked her if everything was okay, and she forced a smile, saying she was just tired. But her response felt rehearsed, lacking the genuine warmth I had come to expect from her. The weekends, once filled with laughter and activities, became more strained. Emily started finding reasons to leave the house, errands that seemed to take longer than they should. She would come back with vague explanations, her eyes avoiding mine. I wanted to believe her, to trust that she was telling the truth, but the seed of doubt had been planted. One night, after she had fallen asleep, I couldn't resist the urge to check her phone. My heart pounded as I unlocked it, feeling a pang of guilt for invading her privacy. But what I found only fueled my suspicions. There were numerous messages from Mark, more than I would have expected for casual friends. They were always deleted, but the sheer volume of them, coupled with the times they were sent, made me uneasy. The final straw came when Emily abruptly canceled a weekend trip we had planned for months. She claimed she had a sudden work commitment, but something about her demeanor didn't sit right with me. The way she avoided eye contact, the nervous tapping of her fingers on the kitchen counter. It all pointed to something more than a simple change of plans. Desperate for answers, I decided to confide in a mutual friend, Sarah. She had known Emily and me for years, and I hoped she could provide some clarity. When I shared my concerns, Sarah looked troubled. She admitted that she had noticed Emily and Mark spending a lot of time together at social gatherings, always in deep conversation, often separated from the rest of the group. It wasn't definitive proof, but it added to my growing unease. The doubts gnawed at me, invading my thoughts day and night. I found myself questioning everything, scrutinizing every interaction between Emily and Mark. The more I observed, the clearer it became that something was indeed wrong. Emily's behavior, the secretive texts, the evasive answers, they all pointed to a betrayal I was not ready to face. As I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, my mind raced with possibilities. The trust I had once placed in Emily and Mark was crumbling, replaced by a gnawing suspicion that threatened to consume me. Little did I know that the truth, when it finally came to light, would be even more devastating than I could have imagined. One Friday evening, Emily had another one of her late meetings. I couldn't shake the feeling that tonight would be the night I uncovered the truth. I decided to follow her, feeling a mix of guilt and determination as I trailed her car through the familiar streets of our neighborhood. She drove to a part of town I rarely visited, a quiet, upscale neighborhood. I watched from a distance as she parked her car in front of a house I recognized all too well, Mark's. My heart sank, a sickening confirmation of my worst fears. She had lied to me, and here was the proof. I parked a few houses down and waited, the minutes stretching into an eternity. The lights in Mark's house were on, but the curtains were drawn, offering only the occasional shadowy glimpse. Finally, after what felt like hours, I saw them through a gap in the curtains. Emily and Mark, embracing. The sight hit me like a physical blow. I wanted to storm in to confront them both, but I knew I needed more than a glimpse through a window. I pulled out my phone and took a few pictures, my hands shaking. I hated myself for doing it, for spying on my wife and best friend. But I needed evidence, something undeniable. With my heart pounding, I drove away, the weight of what I had seen pressing down on me. Back home, I waited in the dark, the images of Emily and Mark seared into my mind. When Emily finally returned, she was all smiles, acting as if nothing was amiss. I couldn't bring myself to confront her then, not without more concrete proof. Instead, I decided to dig deeper. Over the next few days, I installed a tracking app on Emily's phone, something I never thought I would do. I also set up a small camera in our living room, positioned to catch any suspicious interactions. It felt invasive, wrong, but I needed to know the extent of her betrayal. The following week, while Emily was at work, I went through her phone. The messages between her and Mark were encrypted, but I managed to access her email. There, I found a chain of messages between them, discussing their secret meetings, their plans to keep their affair hidden. The words were like knives, each one cutting deeper than the last. They spoke of love, of stolen moments, of a future that didn't include me. One message stood out. It was from Mark, suggesting they meet at our house while I was at work. The audacity, the sheer disrespect, made my blood boil. I knew then that I needed to catch them in the act, to confront them with undeniable proof. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. That very weekend, Emily told me she had to go out of town for a conference. Her lie was so convincing that, had I not known the truth, I would have believed her without question. I pretended to leave for work as usual, but instead I doubled back and waited in a nearby cafe, keeping an eye on our home through the camera feed on my phone. Sure enough, within an hour, Mark's car pulled up. They entered the house together, laughing and holding hands. The sight of them in our home, the place we had built together, filled me with a rage I had never known. I watched as they moved to the living room, their intimacy unfolding in real time. I couldn't take it anymore. I drove back to the house, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. I parked a little way down the street and approached the house quietly. The front door was unlocked, a testament to their carelessness. As I stepped inside, I heard their voices, muffled but unmistakably theirs. I walked into the living room, and there they were, tangled together on our sofa, oblivious to my presence. For a moment, I just stood there, the betrayal laid out before me. Then, in a voice that barely sounded like my own, I said, "What the hell is going on here?" They sprang apart, the color draining from their faces. Emily stammered, "David, this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" I said, my voice shaking with anger, "because it looks like my wife is cheating on me with my best friend." Mark, ever the coward, tried to back away, but I was quicker. "Don't you dare move," I snapped, my eyes never leaving his. "You've both got a lot of explaining to do." Emily started to cry, but I had no sympathy left. How long? I demanded. How long has this been going on? David, please, she pleaded. It's not what you think. Answer the question, Emily, I said, my voice rising. How long? She hesitated, then whispered, almost a year. A year. 12 months of lies, deceit, and betrayal. The anger that had been simmering inside me boiled over. Get out, I said, my voice deadly calm. Both of you. Get out of my house. Mark tried to speak, but I cut him off. Don't. Just leave. They gathered their things and left, Emily's sobs echoing through the hallway. As the door closed behind them, I sank to the floor, the reality of what had just happened crashing down on me. My marriage, my friendship, everything was in ruins. And the worst part was, I had no idea how to pick up the pieces. The days that followed were a blur of anger, sadness, and disbelief. The home that once felt warm and inviting now felt cold and alien. I took a leave of absence from work, unable to focus on anything but the betrayal that had ripped through my life. Emily tried calling and texting, but I ignored her. I wasn't ready to hear her excuses or apologies. One evening, as I sat in the silence of our living room, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Emily standing there, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She looked broken, but so was I. I let her in, knowing that we needed to have the conversation I had been dreading. David, please, she began, her voice trembling. Let me explain. Explain what, Emily? I said, barely able to contain my anger. Explain how you betrayed me with my best friend? How you lied to me for a year? Tears streamed down her face as she struggled to find the right words. I never meant to hurt you. It just happened. It just happened, I echoed, incredulous. You expect me to believe that an affair that lasted a year just happened? That's not a mistake, Emily. That's a choice you made over and over again. I know, she sobbed. I know I messed up. I was lonely, David. You were always so busy with work, and I felt like I was invisible. Mark was there. He listened to me. He made me feel alive. I shook my head, unable to believe what I was hearing. So, this is my fault? Because I was working hard to provide for us? No, she said quickly. That's not what I meant. I felt neglected, and Mark took advantage of that. Mark took advantage, I repeated, my voice rising. You're not a victim here, Emily. You made a choice to betray me, to destroy our marriage. She looked at me, her eyes filled with desperation. David, I love you. I never stopped loving you. I want to make this right, to fix our marriage. Fix it? I laughed bitterly. How do you expect to fix this? You've shattered my trust, my faith in you. How can we ever go back to what we had? I'll do anything, she pleaded. Counseling, therapy, whatever it takes. Just please, don't give up on us. I stared at her, the woman I had loved for so long, now a stranger to me. I wanted to believe her, to hope that we could somehow rebuild what was lost. But the pain was too raw, the betrayal too deep. I don't know if I can, I said finally, my voice breaking. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. She collapsed into tears, and for a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy, but it was quickly overshadowed by the memory of what I had seen, what she had done. You need to leave, I said, standing up. I can't deal with this right now. David, please, she begged, reaching for me. Let's talk about this. We can work through it. I pulled away, my resolve hardening. Not now, Emily. I need time to think. She left, her sobs echoing down the hallway as she walked out the door. I closed it behind her, the weight of our shattered marriage pressing down on me. The next day, I received a call from Mark. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. David, he said, his voice hesitant. Can we talk? I have nothing to say to you, I replied coldly. Please, just hear me out, he pleaded. I know I messed up. I know I betrayed you in the worst way possible, but I need you to understand that it was never about hurting you. Not about hurting me? I scoffed. You slept with my wife, Mark. How could that be anything but about hurting me? It wasn't like that, he insisted. I was lonely too. We were both looking for something we weren't getting at home. But I never stopped valuing our friendship. Our friendship? I snapped. You destroyed our friendship the moment you decided to sleep with Emily. You don't get to play the victim here." He was silent for a moment before he spoke again, his voice filled with regret. "I know, and I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean much, but I am. I wish I could take it all back." "Well, you can't," I said, my voice cold. "You and Emily have made your choices. Now you have to live with them." I hung up, my anger simmering. How could they both act like this was something that just happened, like they had no control over their actions? It was infuriating, and I needed an outlet for my rage. Over the next few days, I threw myself into activities to keep my mind off the betrayal. I went for long runs, worked out at the gym, and even started painting again, something I hadn't done in years. But no matter what I did, the pain lingered, a constant reminder of the life I had lost. Emily continued to reach out, begging for another chance, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I needed space, time to process everything. My emotions were a tangled mess of anger, sadness, and betrayal, and I didn't know how to untangle them. One evening, as I sat on the porch staring out at the sunset, my neighbor Tom came over. He had always been a good friend, someone I could talk to about anything. "Hey, man," he said, sitting down next to me. "You okay?" "No," I admitted, my voice raw. "Everything's a mess." He nodded, his expression sympathetic. "I heard about what happened. I'm sorry, David. That's tough." "Yeah," I said, my eyes filling with tears. "I don't know how to move forward from this." "One step at a time," he said gently. "It's going to hurt for a while, but you'll get through it. And you don't have to do it alone. You've got friends who care about you." His words were a small comfort, a reminder that I wasn't entirely alone in this. As the days turned into weeks, I started to lean on my friends more, finding solace in their support. Emily and I eventually sat down for a serious conversation. She was still adamant about wanting to save our marriage, but I wasn't sure if I had it in me to try. "I know I've hurt you deeply," she said, her voice trembling, "but I believe we can heal from this. I believe we can rebuild our trust." "I don't know, Emily," I said, my voice filled with uncertainty. "I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again." "Please," she whispered, reaching out to take my hand. "Let's try. For the sake of everything we once had. For the sake of the love we shared." I looked at her, searching for the woman I had fallen in love with. The road ahead would be long and painful, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to take that journey with her. But as I stared into her tear-filled eyes, I knew I had to at least try. "Okay," I said softly. "We'll try. But this won't be easy, and it won't be quick." "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "I know. Thank you, David. Thank you for giving us another chance." As we sat there, holding hands, I felt a glimmer of hope. It was fragile, but it was a start. The journey to healing would be long and arduous, but at least we were taking the first step together. Trying to rebuild my marriage with Emily was like trying to piece together shattered glass. It was painful, and no matter how carefully I moved, I ended up bleeding. We started going to counseling, but each session felt like reopening a wound. Every time I thought about the affair, the images of her and Mark together would flood my mind, filling me with a rage that I struggled to control. I tried to focus on the positive, to remember the good times we had shared, but it was hard. Emily was putting in the effort, being transparent with her phone, her whereabouts, and even cutting off all contact with Mark. Yet the betrayal had created a chasm between us that seemed impossible to bridge. I realized that despite my attempts, I couldn't forgive her. The anger and hurt were too deep. One evening, as I sat alone in the house that once felt like a home, I began to think about Mark. He had taken something precious from me, and I couldn't let him get away with it. I needed to make him pay, to feel the pain that I was enduring. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I needed a plan, something that would hit him where it hurt the most. Mark had always been proud of his career. He worked for a prominent law firm, and his reputation was impeccable. I decided that was where I would strike. I started gathering information, using the same methods I had employed to uncover his affair with Emily. I dug through his social media, his professional connections, and even reached out to a few mutual acquaintances under the guise of catching up. It didn't take long to find a few skeletons in Mark's closet. He had been involved in some shady dealings at work, Nothing too illegal, but enough to raise eyebrows. Armed with this information, I crafted an anonymous letter detailing his indiscretions and sent it to his firm's senior partners. I knew it was a risky move, but I was too far gone to care about the consequences. The fallout was swift. Within a week, Mark was suspended pending an internal investigation. He called me, desperate and frantic, but I didn't answer. I watched from a distance as his perfect life began to crumble. It was a small victory, but it brought me a twisted sense of satisfaction. Emily noticed the change in me. She sensed my growing darkness, the way I distanced myself from her emotionally. She tried to reach out, to reconnect, but I couldn't let go of the anger. One night she confronted me. "David, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I can see it in your eyes. You're not letting go of the pain. You're letting it consume you." I stared at her, my heart cold. "What do you expect, Emily? You think I can just forget what you did? You think I can just move on like nothing happened?" "I don't expect you to forget," she said, tears welling up. "But this revenge? It's not going to help. It's only going to destroy you." "Maybe I don't care," I snapped. "Maybe I want to see him suffer. Maybe I want to see you suffer." Her face crumpled, and she collapsed into tears. I turned away, unable to watch her cry. Part of me knew she was right, that my quest for revenge was eating me alive, but I couldn't stop. The betrayal had ignited something dark within me, and I needed to see it through. The next phase of my plan involved public humiliation. I compiled all the evidence of Emily and Mark's affair, texts, emails, photos, and created an anonymous blog. I shared the link with everyone in our social circle, ensuring that their dirty secret was exposed to the world. The reaction was immediate. Friends and acquaintances called, shocked and appalled by the revelations. Emily's reputation was shattered, and she became a pariah in our community. Mark's life, already in disarray from his professional troubles, took another hit as his personal life became public fodder. Emily confronted me once more, this time with a mix of anger and despair. "Why are you doing this, David? Why are you tearing us apart even more?" "Because I want you to feel what I felt," I said coldly. "I want you to understand the pain of betrayal." "We'll never heal if you keep doing this," she pleaded. "You're pushing me away, destroying any chance we have of rebuilding." "Maybe I don't want to rebuild," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. "Maybe I want to see you suffer as much as I have." She looked at me, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Then there's nothing left for us, is there?" I didn't answer. She turned and walked away. And as I watched her leave, a part of me wondered if I'd gone too far. But the anger, the need for revenge, still burned within me, and I couldn't let it go. In the weeks that followed, the consequences of my actions became more apparent. Mark lost his job, his marriage fell apart, and he eventually moved away, unable to face the disgrace. Emily became a shell of her former self, struggling to navigate the ruins of her life, and as for me, I was left with an emptiness that no amount of revenge could fill. One evening as I sat alone in the house, Emily came to me one last time. She looked tired, defeated, but there was a determination in her eyes. "David," she said softly, "I can't do this anymore. I can't live in this cycle of hatred and revenge. I'm leaving." I looked at her, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. "Where will you go?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But I need to find a way to heal, to move on, and you need to do the same." I nodded, unable to argue. She was right. Our marriage was beyond repair, and we needed to find a way to move forward separately. As she walked out the door, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, but the emptiness remained. The revenge I had sought had destroyed not only Mark and Emily, but also a part of myself. As I stood in the silence of the empty house, I realized that true healing would only come from letting go of the anger and finding a way to rebuild my life from the ashes. A few months passed since Emily left. The house, once filled with warmth and laughter, now felt like a cavern of echoes and memories. I immersed myself in work and hobbies, anything to distract me from the haunting silence. But no matter how hard I tried, the emptiness lingered, a constant reminder of the life that had crumbled around me. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the living room, I received a text from Emily. She wanted to meet, to talk one last time before finalizing our divorce. My heart pounded as I read her message. I agreed, partly out of curiosity and partly out of a need for closure. We met at a small cafe downtown, a place we used to frequent in happier times. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. She looked up as I approached, and for a moment, we just stared at each other, the weight of our shared history hanging between us. "David," she said softly, breaking the silence. "Thank you for meeting me." I nodded, taking a seat across from her. "What did you want to talk about?" She took a deep breath, her eyes filling with tears. "I wanted to apologize again, for everything. For the affair, for the lies, for hurting you so deeply. I know I can't undo the past, but I need you to know how sorry I am." I looked at her, the woman who had once been my world, now a stranger burdened with regret. "I appreciate that, Emily, but sorry doesn't change what happened. It doesn't erase the betrayal." "I know," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I've spent these past few months trying to understand why I did what I did, and I realized that I was searching for something I thought I had lost. But it wasn't about you, or even about Mark. It was about me, my own insecurities, my own failings." Her words hung in the air, a painful admission of her inner turmoil. "I understand," I said quietly, "but understanding doesn't make it hurt any less." She nodded, wiping away a tear. "I know, and I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to thank you for the time we had together, for the love we shared. Despite everything, those years meant everything to me." I felt a lump in my throat, memories of our happier times flooding my mind. "They meant everything to me too, Emily. But we can't go back." "No, we can't," she agreed. "But we can move forward. We can learn from this and become better, stronger people." I nodded, feeling a sense of closure wash over me. "What are your plans now?" She gave a small, sad smile. "I'm moving to a new city. I need a fresh start, a chance to rebuild my life. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I need to find myself again." I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. "I wish you the best, Emily. I really do. I hope you find the happiness you're looking for." "Thank you, David," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I hope you find happiness too. You deserve it." We sat there for a few moments, holding hands, sharing a silent goodbye. Then she stood up, her eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and hope. "Goodbye, David." "Goodbye, Emily," I replied, watching her walk away, the weight of our past lifting with each step she took. As I left the cafe, I felt a strange sense of peace. The chapter with Emily was finally closing, and while it was painful, it was also necessary. It was time to let go of the past and focus on the future, on rebuilding my life and finding my own path to happiness. The day of the divorce trial arrived with a sense of finality. I dressed in a suit that felt too formal for the occasion, my mind heavy with the significance of what was about to happen. The courthouse loomed large as I approached, a symbol of the end of an era. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, filled with the quiet murmur of others waiting for their cases to be heard. Emily and I had agreed to keep things as civil as possible, but I knew that the legal process would be anything but easy. We had both retained attorneys, and as we sat on opposite sides of the courtroom, the reality of our situation settled in. The judge, a stern-looking woman with sharp eyes, called our case, and we stood up, ready to face the dissolution of our marriage. The proceedings began with the division of assets. Our lawyers presented our respective cases, arguing over the house, the cars, and the various possessions we had accumulated over the years. Each item felt like a piece of our shared history being dissected and parceled out. It was painful to watch, but I knew it was necessary. Emily's lawyer argued for a fair split, highlighting her contributions to the household and her sacrifices. My lawyer countered, emphasizing my financial support and the betrayal that had led to our divorce. The judge listened patiently, weighing each argument with care. Next came the matter of custody. Though we had no children, we did have a dog, Max, who had been a part of our family for years. Emily wanted to keep him, arguing that he provided her with emotional support during this difficult time. I loved Max too, but I knew he would be better off with her, given my long hours at work. Reluctantly, I agreed to let her keep him, a small concession in the grand scheme of things. Finally, it was time for us to speak. The judge asked if either of us had anything to say before she made her ruling. Emily stood first, her voice trembling as she addressed the court. "Your Honor," she began, "I deeply regret the actions that led us here. I know that my betrayal hurt David more than words can express. I take full responsibility for my actions and the pain they caused. I only ask for a fair settlement so that we can both move forward with our lives." As she spoke, I saw the sincerity in her eyes. Despite everything, a part of me still cared for her and wanted her to find peace. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions. "Your Honor," I said, "I loved Emily deeply and never imagined we would end up here. Her betrayal shattered my trust, but I also recognized that our marriage had its flaws. I want this divorce to be fair, so we can both start anew." The judge nodded, her expression softening slightly. She took a moment to review the documents before her, then delivered her ruling. The assets would be divided equitably, with Emily receiving a fair share to support her new beginning. The judge's decision felt just, a balanced resolution to an otherwise painful process. As we left the courtroom, Emily and I shared a final glance, a silent acknowledgement of the journey we had taken together and the new paths we were about to forge separately. The trial had been emotionally draining, but it had also provided a sense of closure. Outside the courthouse, I took a deep breath, the crisp air filling my lungs. It was over. The chapter of my life with Emily had officially closed, and now it was time to look ahead. The road to healing and rebuilding would be long, but for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. I knew that there would be difficult days ahead, moments when the pain of betrayal would resurface. But I also knew that I had the strength to overcome it. With the support of friends and family, I was ready to start anew, to find happiness and fulfillment on my own terms. The trial had been a necessary step, and now, with the weight of the past lifted, I could finally begin to move forward. In the months following the divorce, I immersed myself in the process of rebuilding my life. It was a gradual journey, filled with moments of both clarity and confusion. The house, once a symbol of shared dreams, now felt like a blank canvas, waiting to be painted with new memories. I started by redecorating, changing the layout, and making it truly my own. It was therapeutic, a way to reclaim my space and my sense of self. I also reconnected with old friends and made new ones. Tom, my neighbor, was a constant presence, always ready with a kind word or a helping hand. We started a weekly poker night, a tradition that quickly became a highlight of my week. It was a simple pleasure, but it reminded me that life could be good again. Work became a sanctuary. I threw myself into my projects, finding solace in the familiar rhythms of my job. My colleagues, who had been aware of my struggles, were supportive and understanding. My boss even encouraged me to take on new challenges, and I found myself rising to the occasion. With each professional success, I felt a little more like myself. But it wasn't all about work and socializing. I also took time for introspection, seeking to understand how I had reached this point in my life. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Bennett, who helped me navigate the complex emotions of betrayal, anger, and grief. Our sessions were tough, forcing me to confront painful truths, but they were also incredibly healing. "David," Dr. Bennett said one day, "forgiveness is not about condoning what Emily did. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of anger. It's about finding peace within yourself." Her words resonated deeply. Forgiving Emily didn't mean I had to forget her betrayal, but it did mean I could let go of the bitterness that was holding me back. It was a slow process, but with each passing day, I felt a little lighter, a little more at peace. I also rediscovered old passions. Painting, something I had abandoned years ago, became a source of joy and expression. I turned one of the spare bedrooms into a studio, filling it with canvases and colors. The act of creating something beautiful from a blank canvas was incredibly fulfilling, a metaphor for my own journey of rebuilding. One day, while browsing a local art gallery, I met Laura. She was an artist, her work vibrant and full of life. We struck up a conversation about our favorite painters, and before I knew it, we were talking about everything from art to life. There was an ease to our conversation, a connection that felt natural and unforced. Laura and I started seeing each other regularly. Our relationship was different from what I had with Emily. There was no rush, no pressure to define what we were. We simply enjoyed each other's company, sharing our passions and exploring the world together. With Laura, I felt a sense of freedom and joy that I hadn't experienced in a long time. As the seasons changed, so did I. The pain of the past began to fade, replaced by a cautious optimism for the future. I learned to embrace the uncertainty, to find beauty in the journey rather than the destination. One crisp autumn evening, as Laura and I walked hand in hand through the park, she turned to me and said, "David, I can see how far you've come. You're stronger than you realize." Her words, simple yet profound, filled me with a sense of pride. I had come a long way, and while there were still challenges ahead, I knew I was ready to face them. Reflecting on the journey, I realized that the betrayal that had once shattered my world had also set me on a path of self-discovery and growth. I had learned to value myself, to recognize my own worth, and to find happiness within. It was a hard-earned lesson, but one that I would carry with me for the rest of my life. Life, I had come to understand, was not about avoiding pain, but about finding the strength to rise above it. With each new day, I embraced the possibilities that lay ahead, knowing that I had the resilience to overcome whatever came my way. As Laura and I continued our walk, the leaves crunching beneath our feet, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. For the first time in a long time, I was truly happy. And that, I realized, was the greatest revenge of all, living a life filled with joy and love, despite the hardships I had faced. The journey was far from over, but I was ready to embrace it with open arms, confident in my ability to create a future that was uniquely my own.